The dust storm that rolled through Leavenworth, Kansas in the summer of 1878 brought more than just grit and inconvenience. It brought Fiona Wright, clutching a worn carpetbag and looking like she might blow away with the next gust of wind. She stepped off the afternoon train with $23 to her name and nowhere particular to go, which was still better than staying in St. Louis with her sister's husband, who'd made it clear that Fiona's presence in their household was tolerated rather than wanted. At 21 years old, she'd spent her entire life being the extra person, the burden, the mouth that didn't quite deserve feeding. Her parents had died when she was 12, leaving her to be shuffled between relatives who saw her as an obligation rather than a blessing. She'd learned early not to expect much, not to want much, and certainly not to believe she mattered to anyone. The wind whipped her brown hair across her face as she stood on the platform, watching families reunite and businessmen stride purposefully toward waiting carriages. Nobody looked at her twice. Nobody ever did. She was the kind of woman people's eyes slid right past, unremarkable in every way that seemed to count. Average height, average looks, average everything. Forgettable. She pulled her threadbare shawl tighter and started walking toward what looked like the main street. Leavenworth was bigger than she'd expected, bustling with activity despite the dust. Fort Leavenworth sat nearby, which meant soldiers and supplies and commerce. The town had survived the violence of bleeding Kansas and the Civil War, had grown despite everything, and now thrived as a river port and frontier hub. Maybe she could survive here too. Maybe she could find some small corner where she could exist without being a burden. The boarding house on 3rd Street had a sign in the window advertising rooms for let. The woman who answered the door looked Fiona up and down with a practiced eye that calculated worth down to the penny. $2 a week, meals extra, the landlady said. Payment in advance. No men, no drinking, no noise after 9 o'clock. Fiona counted out $8, buying herself a month to find work. The room was barely bigger than a closet with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a hook on the wall for hanging clothes. But it was hers, at least for 30 days. She spent the next week trudging from shop to shop, asking about work. The dress shop didn't need help. The restaurant had just hired someone. The hotel had nothing available. The general store owner took one look at her worn dress and scuffed boots and said he needed someone who could present a better appearance. She tried the laundry, the bakery, even the newspaper office. Nothing. By the end of the 2nd week, her money was dwindling and her hope along with it. She sat in her tiny room as the evening light faded, counting her remaining dollars, and feeling that familiar hollow sensation of being unnecessary in a world that had no space for unnecessary things. The next morning, she walked further from town, past the neat houses and businesses, toward the outskirts where the land opened up. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, maybe just some quiet place to think, or maybe the courage to admit defeat and beg her sister to take her back. That's when she saw the ranch. It sprawled across the landscape, substantial and well-maintained. Fences in good repair, a large barn that looked sturdy, cattle grazing in distant pastures. The house itself was 2 stories, painted white, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. It looked like the kind of place where people belonged, where they had purpose and position. She was about to turn back when she noticed the man trying to wrangle a horse in the corral. Even from a distance, she could see he was struggling. The horse, a large chestnut mare, was having none of whatever the man was attempting. She watched as he got dragged several feet before letting go of the lead rope. Before she could think better of it, Fiona set down her bag and walked closer. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair and a frustrated expression. He didn't notice her approach until she called out, "Excuse me." He spun around, startled. Up close, she could see he had gray eyes and a face that would have been handsome if it wasn't set in such a scowl. Dust covered his clothes and there was a streak of mud across his cheek. "This is private property," he said, not unkindly but not welcomingly either. "I can see that. I also can see that horse is playing you like a fiddle." His scowl deepened. "I've been handling horses since before I could walk. Then you should know better than to approach her from that angle when she's already skittish." The words came out before Fiona could stop them. She'd spent enough time on her uncle's farm as a child to know her way around animals, even if she knew nothing else useful. The man stared at her for a long moment. "Is that so? The way you're moving. You're in her blind spot and it's making her nervous. And you're frustrated, which means you're tense, which means she's tense. And I suppose you could do better." Fiona hadn't meant to imply that. She'd just spoken without thinking, the way she always did when she forgot to make herself small and quiet. "I didn't mean, no, go ahead." He gestured toward the corral. "Show me." She should have walked away. She should have apologized for intruding and left. But something in his expression wasn't quite mockery. It was more like challenge, tinged with genuine curiosity. She climbed over the fence, her heart pounding. The mare watched her approach, ears swiveling. Fiona kept her movements slow and deliberate, approaching from an angle where the horse could see her clearly. She kept her breathing steady, her posture relaxed despite her nervousness. "Easy, girl," she murmured. "Nobody's going to hurt you. Just want to say hello." The mare snorted but didn't move away. Fiona kept talking, nonsense words in a low, calm voice. She didn't reach for the trailing lead rope right away. Instead, she let the horse get used to her presence, let the animal make the choice to stay rather than bolt. When she finally picked up the lead rope, it was almost anticlimactic. The mare followed her across the corral without resistance. The man was leaning against the fence, watching with an expression she couldn't quite read. When she led the horse over, he shook his head slowly. "Well, I'll be damned." Fiona's face flushed. "She's a good horse. She was just scared." "That good horse has been making my life difficult for 3 days straight." He opened the gate and took the lead rope from her. "Gideon Ramsey, this is my ranch. Fiona Wright." She climbed back over the fence, suddenly aware of how forward she'd been. "I should go. I'm sorry for intruding." "You looking for work?" The question stopped her in her tracks. "What?" I asked. "If you're looking for work. I've got a housekeeper, but she's been after me to hire help for months. Says the place is too big for one person to manage properly. I've been putting her off, but after watching that," he nodded toward the mare, "I'm thinking maybe you'd be useful to have around." Fiona's heart hammered. "I don't know anything about keeping house. Not really. I mean, I can cook basic things and clean, but I've never—" "Can you follow instructions?" "Yes." "Can you work hard without complaining?" "Yes." "Can you start tomorrow?" She stared at him. "You don't know anything about me. I know you've got away with animals and you're honest enough to admit what you don't know. That's more than most." He studied her for a moment. "You're new in town. I saw you get off the train couple weeks back. You've been looking for work. I've heard folks mention it. You need a job. I need help." Seems straightforward enough. "Why would you hire me based on one interaction with a horse?" Gideon Ramsey smiled for the first time, and it transformed his face entirely. "Because that horse is worth more than everything else on this ranch combined, and she's about to foal in 6 weeks. She's been nothing but trouble since I bought her, and if you can keep her calm, you've already earned your wages. Everything else is just extra." Fiona wanted to say yes immediately, but years of being unwanted had taught her caution. "What are the wages?" "Room and board plus $15 a month. Sundays off after morning chores. You'll work with Mrs. Chen, my housekeeper. She's in charge. You do what she says." Fair, $15 a month, room and board. It was more than fair, it was a lifeline. When should I start? Dawn tomorrow. Bring your things. There's a room off the kitchen that's sitting empty. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He nodded back and turned to lead the mare toward the barn. Fiona picked up her carpet bag and started the walk back to town, her mind whirling. It wasn't until she was halfway back that she realized she was smiling. The next morning she arrived at the ranch just as the sun was breaking over the horizon. Gideon was already up, working in the barn. He pointed her toward the house without much ceremony. Mrs. Chen turned out to be a Chinese woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, efficient movements, and a no-nonsense attitude that Fiona immediately respected. She looked Fiona over much the same way the boarding house landlady had, but with less judgment and more assessment. "Mr. Gideon says you know animals," Mrs. Chen said, her English accented but clear. "Some. Mostly horses. Good. He needs help with that mare, make him crazy for days." She showed Fiona the room much bigger than the boarding house with a real window and a bed that didn't sag. "You keep this clean. You help me with house, with cooking, with laundry. You help Mr. Gideon with animals when he needs." "Yes. Yes, madam." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "You call me Mrs. Chen, I teach you everything you need. You work hard, we get along fine." The first week passed in a blur of activity. Fiona learned that Gideon ran the ranch largely by himself, with occasional help from a few hired hands who came for specific jobs. His parents had died 2 years earlier in a cholera outbreak, leaving him the property and a considerable burden of responsibility at just 27 years old. He'd been managing alone since then, building the herd, improving the land, working dawn to dark every single day. Mrs. Chen had been his mother's housekeeper and had stayed on after her death, but she was getting older and the work was becoming too much. She taught Fiona how to manage the kitchen, how to do laundry the way Gideon liked his shirts done, how to keep the floors clean despite the constant trail of dust and mud that came with ranch life. But the real work, the work that mattered, happened in the barn. The mare's name was Copper, and she was as beautiful as she was temperamental. Gideon explained that he'd bought her from a breeder in Missouri, paying a small fortune for her bloodlines and the foal she was carrying. The stallion that had sired the foal was supposedly one of the finest in 3 states, and if the breeding produced the quality everyone expected, it would establish Gideon's ranch as a serious horse breeding operation. "Everything's riding on this," he told Fiona one morning as they stood outside Copper's stall. "I've put most of my capital into expanding the breeding program. If this foal is as good as it should be, I can start building something real here." If something goes wrong, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Fiona spent hours with Copper every day. She'd brush the mare, talk to her, check her over for any signs of distress. Copper, who'd been fractious and difficult with Gideon, was calm with Fiona. The mare would rest her huge head against Fiona's shoulder and breathe softly while Fiona murmured to her. "I don't understand it," Gideon said one afternoon, watching from outside the stall. "What do you say to her?" Fiona felt her face heat. "Nothing important, just talking. Must be something. She nearly kicked me yesterday when I tried to check her legs. You're always in a hurry. She can feel that." He leaned against the stall door, studying her. Fiona kept her eyes on the horse, uncomfortable with his attention. She'd been at the ranch for 3 weeks, and while Gideon was always polite and fair, he rarely spoke to her beyond what was necessary for work. This sustained attention was new and unsettling. "Mrs. Chen says you're a good worker." "I try to be." "She says you never complain, never waste time, never need to be told things twice." Fiona didn't know what to say to that. She just did her work the way she'd always done, everything trying to be useful enough to justify her existence. She also says you eat like a bird and you're up before dawn every morning, even though I don't expect you until 6. I don't need much sleep. Or you're not comfortable enough to sleep. His voice was quiet. This is your home now, Fiona, for as long as you want it to be. You don't have to earn your place every single moment of every single day. Something in her chest twisted. She focused on running the brush along Copper's neck. I should finish here before supper. He was quiet for a moment longer, then pushed off from the door. All right, but Fiona, you do good work. I want you to know that. You're not just earning your keep, you're actually helping. He left before she could respond, which was good because she didn't trust her voice. She pressed her face against Copper's warm neck and let herself feel, just for a moment, the dangerous flutter of mattering to someone. As summer deepened into its hottest days, Fiona settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She learned to read the weather by the way the cattle moved, learned which chickens were reliable layers and which were just troublemakers, learned how to tell when Gideon was worried even though he never said so directly. She also learned that she liked watching him work. He was good with the animals, patient despite his sometimes gruff exterior. He could gentle a spooked calf or doctor a sick cow with steady hands and a calm presence. He was fair with the men he hired for roundup and branding, working as hard as any of them despite owning the place. He was kind to Mrs. Chen, respectful and appreciative in ways that made it clear he saw her as a person rather than just a servant. And he was kind to Fiona, though she suspected he didn't think of it as kindness. He just treated her like she mattered, like her observations about the animals were worth hearing, like her presence on the ranch was valuable rather than merely tolerated. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. One evening in late July, a summer storm rolled in fast and fierce. Fiona was in the barn checking on Copper when the first crack of thunder sent the mare into a panic. Copper reared in her stall, eyes rolling white, hooves crashing against the walls. "Easy, easy," Fiona called, but the mare was beyond hearing. Another crack of thunder, closer this time, and Copper went wild. Gideon came running from the house. "Get back!" But Fiona was already in the stall, dodging hooves, getting herself between the mare and the wall. If Copper kicked wrong, if she injured herself or the foal, Fiona, get out of there. She'll hurt herself. Fiona got her hands on the mare's halter, using her body weight to try to calm the thrashing animal. A hoof caught her shoulder and she gasped in pain, but she didn't let go. "Copper, stop, you're all right. You're safe." Gideon was suddenly there beside her, his hands joining hers on the halter, his voice joining hers in the steady stream of calming sounds. Together they held the mare, gentled her, brought her back from panic to mere fear to finally, as the thunder moved on, something like calm. When Copper finally stood still, sides heaving but no longer fighting, Gideon turned to Fiona. "Let me see your shoulder." "It's fine." "It's not fine. I saw her catch you. Let me see." His hands were gentle as he eased back her sleeve. Even in the dim barn light she could see the bruise already forming. His jaw tightened. "You could have been killed. She could have lost the foal. The foal isn't worth your life." Fiona looked at him in surprise. He was still holding her arm, his face closer than it had ever been, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. Fiona. Her name was almost a question. "Don't you know?" A louder crack of thunder interrupted him, and Copper shifted nervously. The moment broke. Gideon stepped back, ran a hand through his hair. "I'll stay with her tonight," Fiona said quickly. "In case the storm gets worse. Then I'm staying too. I'll bring blankets." They spent the night in the barn, taking turns sitting with Copper. Whenever Fiona closed her eyes, she felt Gideon's hands on her arm, heard the way he'd said her name. like she mattered, like he couldn't bear the thought of her being hurt. She told herself she was imagining things. Men like Gideon Ramsey didn't fall for women like her. He was a property owner, respected in town, with a future ahead of him. She was nobody from nowhere, with nothing to offer but hard work and a way with animals. But the way he looked at her the next morning when dawn broke through the barn doors, that wasn't her imagination. August arrived with scorching heat and the constant worry about Copper's impending delivery. The mare was getting close, her behavior changing in ways that had Gideon checking on her every few hours. Fiona moved a cot into the barn, insisting on sleeping there to monitor her. "You don't have to do this," Gideon said for the dozenth time. "Yes, I do. She trusts me. If something happens, I need to be here." "Then I'm staying too." So they both kept vigil, talking in low voices during the long night hours. That's when Fiona learned about his childhood, about parents who'd loved him fiercely and taught him that land was more than property, it was legacy and responsibility combined. About his mother who'd insisted on learning everyone's name and story, who'd sponsored Mrs. Chen's immigration and treated her like family. About his father who'd believed a man's worth was measured in how he treated those who could do nothing for him. "They would have liked you," Gideon said one night. "My mother especially. She always said the measure of a person was how they treated animals and children." "I don't know anything about children, but you know about gentleness, about patience, about showing up every day and doing what needs doing without fanfare or complaint." He paused. "About making everyone around you better just by being present." Fiona's throat tightened. "I'm not. That's not. It is, though." Mrs. Chen laughs now. "Did you notice? She sings sometimes when she's working. She hasn't done that since my mother died. And the ranch hands actually look forward to meals now because you always remember their names and ask about their families." And he stopped. Fiona's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "And you what?" Gideon turned to look at her directly. In the lamplight, his eyes were dark and serious. "And I find myself looking forward to dawn because it means I'll see you. I find myself making excuses to check on Copper because you'll be there. I find myself thinking about things I'd put aside, things like futures and family and what it might mean to have someone to share all this with." "Gideon, I know I'm not saying this right. I know you probably think I'm crazy. We've only known each other a few months. But Fiona, from that first day when you climbed into the corral like you had every right to be there, like you belonged, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." Fiona couldn't breathe. This wasn't happening. Men didn't say these things to her. Men didn't look at her like Gideon was looking at her right now. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know you get up before dawn and you sing to the chickens when you think nobody's listening. I know you slip extra food to the barn cat even though you pretend you don't. I know you write letters every Sunday but you never post them, and I think it's because there's nobody who'd write back. I know you have nightmares sometimes because I can hear you from the barn. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met and you don't even realize it. I'm not strong. I'm nobody. I've never been important to anyone. Then let me be the first." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "Let me show you what it means to be important to someone, to be essential, to be treasured." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Why?" "Because when I'm with you, everything makes sense. The work, the worry, the weight of all this, it's bearable when you're beside me. More than bearable. It's good. You make my life better just by being in it." She wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But years of being unwanted had taught her caution, had taught her that hope was dangerous. "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "We'll figure it out together, if you want to, if you feel even a fraction of what I feel." Did she? Looking at him in the lamplight, Feeling his hand warm around hers, she tried to inventory her own feelings. The way her chest felt light when he smiled. The way she found excuses to be near him. The way his praise meant more than anyone else's. The way she'd started thinking of the ranch as home not because of the place but because of him. "I feel it," she whispered. "I'm terrified, but I feel it." He smiled, and it was like sunrise. "Then that's enough. We'll start there." He leaned forward slowly, telegraphing his intention, and kissed her softly. His lips were gentle against hers, asking rather than demanding. Fiona's eyes fluttered closed, and she let herself really feel what it meant to be wanted. When they pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to court you properly. I'm going to take you to church socials and town gatherings. I'm going to make sure everyone in Leavenworth knows you're mine and I'm yours. I'm going to—" Copper chose that moment to shift restlessly in her stall, interrupting the moment with perfect timing. They both laughed, the tension breaking into something warm and comfortable. "Rain check on the romantic declarations?" Gideon asked. "Rain check," Fiona agreed, but she didn't let go of his hand. 3 nights later, Copper went into labor. Fiona woke to the mare's distressed sounds and immediately called for Gideon. He came running from the house, and together they worked through the long, difficult hours. The foal was positioned wrong, and for a terrifying stretch of time, Fiona thought they might lose both mother and baby. But Gideon's hands were steady and sure, and Fiona kept Copper calm through sheer force of will and endless gentle reassurance. When the foal finally slipped into the world in a rush of fluid and flailing legs, Fiona burst into tears of relief. "It's a colt," Gideon said, wonder in his voice. "Look at him, Fiona. He's perfect." The colt was indeed perfect, long-legged and bright-eyed, already trying to stand within minutes of birth. Copper, exhausted but alert, began cleaning her baby with obvious pride. Gideon turned to Fiona, saw her tears, and pulled her into his arms. She went willingly, letting herself be held, letting herself feel the relief and joy and overwhelming sense of accomplishment. "We did it," she said against his chest. "You did it. This wouldn't have happened without you. Copper wouldn't have made it through without you keeping her calm. Fiona, you saved them both." When she pulled back to look at him, his eyes were suspiciously bright too. On impulse, she stood on her toes and kissed him. He made a sound of surprise that turned into pleasure, his arms tightening around her. This kiss was different from the first, deeper, more certain. A promise and a claiming all at once. When they finally broke apart, both flushed and breathing hard, Gideon laughed. "If this is what I get for successful foaling, I should get more pregnant mares." She swatted his shoulder, but she was smiling. Really smiling, the kind that came from deep inside, from a place she'd thought was permanently dark. "Come on," he said, taking her hand. "Let's give them some time to bond. Mrs. Chen will want to know the good news, and I imagine she's already got breakfast going." They walked to the house hand in hand as the sun rose over the Kansas prairie. Mrs. Chen took one look at them and smiled knowingly. "Good news and good news, I see." Fiona blushed but didn't pull her hand away from Gideon's. This was real. He was real. The way he looked at her, like she hung the moon, like her existence mattered more than anything, that was real too. The weeks that followed felt like living in a dream. Gideon courted her with an intensity that was both thrilling and overwhelming. He brought her wildflowers from the far pasture. He taught her to ride properly, his hands steadying her until she found her balance. He took her to town on Saturday afternoons, proudly introducing her to everyone they met, as though she was someone worth knowing. The town's response was mixed. Some folks were happy for Gideon, pleased to see him moving on from his grief. Others were more skeptical, wondering about this unknown woman who'd appeared from nowhere and caught the attention of one of the area's most eligible bachelors. Fiona tried not to let the whispers bother her, but old insecurities died hard. One afternoon, while shopping for supplies, she overheard two women talking. I heard she was practically destitute when she arrived, not a penny to her name. And now she's living at the Ramsey Ranch. Convenient, isn't it? Poor Gideon. He's always been too kind-hearted for his own good. She's probably after his property. Fiona left the store without buying anything, her eyes stinging. She walked quickly back toward the ranch, trying to outpace the poisonous words, but rumors traveled faster than feet. By the time she reached the ranch, Gideon was waiting on the porch, his expression thunderous. I heard what those women said. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Fiona, look at me. She stopped but couldn't quite meet his eyes. You think that's what this is? That you're some kind of gold digger taking advantage of me? No, but maybe they're right that you could do better, that you should stop. The word was sharp enough to cut through her spiral. He came down the steps and took her shoulders gently. Listen to me very carefully. There is no better. There's just you. You who works harder than anyone I know. You who saved copper and the foal. You who makes this ranch feel like a home instead of just a piece of land. You who makes me laugh and makes me think and makes me want things I'd given up on. But I don't bring anything. No money, no family, no, you bring yourself. That's everything. He tilted her chin up until she had to meet his eyes. I love you. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you climbed into that corral and told me I was doing it wrong. I love your strength and your gentleness. I love how you talk to the animals. I love how you've become friends with Mrs. Chen. I love waking up knowing I'll see you. I love going to sleep thinking about you. And I want, more than anything, for you to believe that you deserve to be loved. The tears came then, hot and fast. I don't know how. Then let me teach you. He pulled her close, let her cry against his chest. Let me show you every single day that you matter, that you're important, that your existence makes everything better. She clung to him, letting years of feeling unwanted crack and break. It hurt, but it was the kind of hurt that came with healing. That evening, Gideon called Mrs. Chen into the parlor where he and Fiona were sitting. I want to do this properly, he said, looking nervous for the first time since Fiona had known him. Mrs. Chen, you're the closest thing to family I have left. I'd like your blessing. Mrs. Chen looked between them, her expression softening. You want to marry this girl, I do, if she'll have me. Fiona's heart stopped. They hadn't discussed marriage explicitly, though the courtship had been heading clearly in that direction. But to hear him say it, to see him actually asking, she is good girl, Mrs. Chen said. Work hard, kind heart, smart with animals, make you happy, I see this. She turned to Fiona. He is good man, sometimes stubborn, sometimes too serious, but good heart, honest, fair, he will treat you well. I know he will, Fiona whispered. Mrs. Chen nodded, satisfied. Then you have my blessing. I will cook special dinner for celebration. When she left, closing the door behind her, Gideon turned to Fiona. I don't have a ring yet. I wanted to talk to you first, make sure you wanted this before I went to the jeweler. But Fiona Wright, I would be honored beyond measure if you would agree to be my wife. Her hands were shaking. You're sure? You're absolutely sure this is what you want? I've never been more sure of anything. People will talk, they'll say terrible things. Let them talk. I know the truth. You know the truth, that's what matters. She took a deep breath. This was the moment. She could say no, could protect herself from the possibility of future hurt. Or she could say yes and trust that this man, this good man who saw value in her when she couldn't see it in herself, would keep his word. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. His smile was incandescent. He kissed her then, deep and thorough. a kiss that promised everything and demanded nothing but her presence beside him. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Leavenworth. Fiona wore a dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, simple but beautiful, made of cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar. Gideon wore his best suit and looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Some people from town attended, curious or genuinely happy or simply there for the spectacle. But Fiona barely noticed them. She only saw Gideon standing at the front of the church, waiting for her. When she reached him and he took her hands, she saw tears in his eyes. "You're so beautiful," he whispered. "You're just saying that. I'm saying it because it's true. You've always been beautiful, Fiona. I'm just lucky enough to get to tell you so for the rest of our lives." The ceremony was simple and short. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Gideon kissed her sweetly while Mrs. Chen wiped her eyes and the small congregation applauded. The wedding breakfast at the ranch was a more intimate affair. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with the food, and the few close friends Gideon had invited were warm and welcoming to Fiona. As the afternoon wore on and people began to depart, Fiona found herself alone with her husband on the front porch. Husband. The word felt strange and wonderful. "Happy?" Gideon asked, his arm around her waist. "Terrified. But yes, happy." "Good terrified or bad terrified?" She leaned into him. "Good terrified. The kind that comes with new things." He kissed her temple. "I promise I'll spend every day of our lives making sure you never regret this, making sure you know how loved you are, how important you are." "I'm starting to believe it," she said softly. "When I'm with you, I'm starting to believe I matter." "You don't just matter, Fiona. You're everything." That night, as they lay together in Gideon's room that was now their room, Fiona marveled at the strange turn her life had taken. Just months ago, she'd been alone and directionless, convinced of her own irrelevance. Now she was married to a man who loved her, living in a place that felt like home, with purpose and position and the strange new sensation of being wanted. "What are you thinking?" Gideon asked, running his fingers through her hair. "That I'm lucky, that I don't deserve this." "Stop that." His voice was gentle but firm. "You deserve every good thing, and I'm the lucky one. I get to spend the rest of my life with you." She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you." "I don't think I've said that clearly enough, but I do. I love you so much it scares me." "Don't be scared." He kissed her softly. "I've got you, always." The first year of their marriage was both harder and easier than Fiona had expected. Harder because running a ranch was constant work, because there were setbacks and difficulties and moments of frustration. Easier because she wasn't alone anymore. Every challenge was faced together. Every small victory was celebrated together. The colt that Copper had foaled, whom they'd named Ranger, grew into a magnificent young horse that attracted buyers from 3 states away. Gideon's breeding program was officially established as one of the finest in Kansas. The ranch prospered, and with prosperity came expansion: more land, more cattle, more horses. But through it all, Gideon never forgot what mattered most. Every morning he found a reason to tell Fiona something he appreciated about her. Every evening he made time to sit with her on the porch and talk about their days. He never took her presence for granted, never treated her like an obligation. And slowly, carefully, Fiona learned to believe in her own worth. In the spring of 1880, she discovered she was pregnant. The news sent Gideon into a frenzy of preparation, fixing up the nursery, buying supplies months in advance, worrying over every detail. "I'm not made of glass," Fiona laughed as he insisted she sit down while he carried a basket of eggs. "I know, but you're carrying our child. Let me fuss." "You're going to drive me crazy with 9 months of fussing." "That's my right as a husband and soon-to-be father." Mrs. Chen was delighted by the news, immediately beginning to knit tiny blankets and booties. She also took it upon herself to ensure Fiona ate properly and rested enough, teaming up with Gideon to form a unified front of concern. "I'm surrounded by worriers," Fiona complained to Copper one afternoon as she brushed the mare, but she was smiling. Being worried over, being cared for, being treated as precious, these were new experiences, and she was learning to accept them with grace. The pregnancy was mostly easy, though the summer heat was difficult. Fiona continued working around the ranch as much as Gideon would allow, which wasn't as much as she wanted. They compromised, with her doing lighter tasks and staying close to the house. One afternoon in late July, as she sat in the shade, snapping beans with Mrs. Chen, she felt the baby kick for the first time. The sensation was so surprising that she gasped. "What wrong?" Mrs. Chen asked immediately. "Nothing. Nothing's wrong. The baby just—" She took Mrs. Chen's hand and placed it on her belly. They waited, and after a moment the baby obliged with another kick. Mrs. Chen's face lit up. "Strong baby. Good sign." Gideon came around the corner at that moment. "What's a good sign?" "Your child is making its presence known," Fiona said, reaching for his hand. She placed it where Mrs. Chen's had been, and sure enough, the baby kicked again. The look on Gideon's face was something Fiona would treasure forever, awe and joy and overwhelming love all mixed together. "Our baby," he whispered. "Our baby," she agreed. That evening, as they lay in bed with his hand on her growing belly, Gideon talked about the future. "I want our children to grow up knowing they matter, knowing they're loved unconditionally. I want them to never doubt their worth the way you doubted yours." "I don't doubt it anymore," Fiona said. "You made sure of that. Good. But Fiona, I mean it. I want our children to see how I love you. I want that to be their example. I want them to grow up understanding that love means cherishing someone, supporting them, treating them as essential." "They will. Because you're going to be an amazing father." "We're going to be amazing parents," he corrected. "Together." Their son was born on a cold November morning. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Gideon thought he might lose his mind from worry. But finally, after hours of work, the baby let out a strong, healthy cry. Fiona, exhausted and sweaty, reached for her son with shaking arms. The baby was red-faced and angry, but to her, he was perfect. "He's so beautiful," she whispered. Gideon, tears streaming down his face, kissed her forehead. "You're incredible. You're absolutely incredible." They named him Gideon Ramsey, and from the moment he entered the world, he was loved beyond measure. Gideon was a devoted father, getting up for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and marveling at him. "I never knew I could love something this much," he said one night, cradling Gabriel while Fiona rested. "I thought what I felt for you was the height of it, but this, I know," Fiona said softly. "It's different but just as powerful. He's going to grow up so loved, so wanted, he's never going to question his importance." Fiona felt tears prick her eyes. "No, he's not." The first years of Gabriel's life were full and busy. The ranch continued to grow, with Gideon's reputation as a horse breeder spreading throughout the region. They hired more hands to help with the work, built an addition onto the house, expanded the stables. But no matter how busy they got, family dinners were sacred. Every evening they sat together, Gideon, Fiona, Gabriel, and Mrs. Chen, who had become family in every way that mattered, and talked about their days. Gideon made sure Gabriel knew stories about his grandparents, about the history of the ranch, about the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. And Fiona, watching her husband with their son, felt a contentment she'd never imagined possible. When Gabriel was 3, Fiona found herself pregnant again. This time, The pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Or perhaps because she'd grown into herself over the years, had learned to trust her body and her strength. Their daughter was born in early spring of 1884, arriving quickly and with less drama than her brother. She had Fiona's brown hair and Gideon's gray eyes, and she was fierce from her first breath. "What should we name her?" Gideon asked, holding his daughter with the same wonder he'd shown with Gabriel. "I was thinking Lily," Fiona said. "After your mother." Gideon's eyes filled. His mother's name had been Lillian. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. She would have loved to meet her grandchildren. This way, part of her lives on." So Lily Ramsey joined the family and, if possible, made their lives even fuller and richer. Gabriel was a devoted big brother, always wanting to help with the baby. Mrs. Chen knitted endlessly, producing a mountain of blankets and clothes. And Gideon somehow managed to be even more attentive than before, making sure Fiona never felt overwhelmed. "I don't know how you do it," one of the ranch hands' wives said one day, watching Fiona manage both children while supervising the household. "You make it look easy." Fiona laughed. "It's not easy, but it's worth it. And I don't do it alone. Gideon and Mrs. Chen help with everything. You're lucky. Most men don't bother with children, especially babies." "I know." Fiona glanced toward the barn where Gideon was working with a new horse. "I know exactly how lucky I am." The years flowed by, marked by seasons and harvests and the steady growth of children. Gabriel started school in Leavenworth, riding into town each day with his father. Lily grew from a fierce baby into a spirited toddler who kept everyone on their toes. The ranch continued to prosper. Gideon's horses were sought after throughout the region. He'd kept his word about the breeding program, and Ranger's offspring commanded impressive prices. They were comfortable financially, able to give their children opportunities Fiona had never dreamed of for herself. But the greatest gift they gave their children wasn't material. It was the example of their marriage, the model of mutual respect and support and deep, abiding love. One evening, when Gabriel was 8 and Lily was 5, Fiona found her son watching her and Gideon with a thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" she asked. "Tommy at school says his pa doesn't kiss his ma like pa kisses you. He says grown-ups don't do that." Gideon, who'd been reading nearby, looked up with amusement. "Is that so? Are you and ma different from other Pa's and Ma's?" Fiona and Gideon exchanged glances. "Maybe a little," Gideon said. "Your ma and I love each other very much. We make sure to show that love every day." "Why?" "Because love isn't just a feeling. It's actions. It's treating someone with care and respect. It's making sure they know how important they are." Gabriel seemed to consider this. "Ma, did you always know you were important?" The question caught Fiona off guard. She looked at her son, this bright, confident child who'd never doubted his worth for a moment. "No," she said honestly. "I had to learn that. Your father taught me." "How?" "By showing me every single day, by telling me, by treating me like I mattered." "But you do matter. You're my ma." The simple certainty in his voice made her eyes sting. "Yes, and you're my son, and you matter more than anything." Gabriel seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to his book. But later, after the children were asleep, Gideon pulled Fiona close. "You handled that well." "I just told him the truth. Our children are growing up so secure, so confident. They'll never know what it's like to doubt their place in the world. That's because of you, because of how you love us." "It's because of us," Gideon corrected. "You're an amazing mother, Fiona, and an amazing wife, and an amazing person. I hope you know that now." "I do," and she meant it. After nearly a decade of marriage, years of being loved and cherished, she finally, truly believed in her own worth. "I really do." When Fiona turned 31, Gideon threw her a surprise party. their home filled with friends and neighbors, all celebrating her. It was still strange sometimes, being the center of positive attention, but she'd learned to accept it with grace. "Make a wish," Gideon said as she stood before the cake Mrs. Chen had baked. But looking around the room at her family and friends, at the life she'd built, Fiona realized she had nothing to wish for. Everything she'd ever wanted, though she hadn't known to want it until she had it, was right here. "I don't need to wish," she said. "I have everything already." Not everything. Gideon's eyes twinkled with mischief. But close. 2 months later, she discovered she was pregnant again. At 31 and 37 respectively, they hadn't been planning for more children, but the news was no less joyous for being unexpected. "Looks like I'm building another cradle," Gideon said, his hand on her belly. "Looks like we're going to have another adventure." This pregnancy was harder than the previous two. Fiona tired more easily and dealt with more discomfort. But she also had more help. Gabriel and Lily were old enough to assist with tasks. Mrs. Chen was experienced with managing the household, and Gideon refused to let her overwork. Their second son was born in the winter of 1889, arriving during a snowstorm that blanketed the Kansas prairie in white. He was smaller than Gabriel had been, but healthy and strong. "What about Samuel?" Gideon suggested. "After your father." Fiona felt a lump in her throat. She'd told Gideon about her father over the years, about the man who died too young and left her adrift. "Samuel Ramsey, I like it." Gabriel and Lily were enchanted with their new brother. They took turns holding him carefully, arguing over who got to help with what. The house was full of noise and life and love. "This is what I always wanted," Gideon said one evening as they watched their 3 children playing together. "A full house, a full life, a full heart." "Mine too," Fiona said. "Even when I didn't know that's what I wanted, this is everything." The years continued their steady march. Gabriel grew tall and serious, taking after his father in temperament and looks. He had a gift with horses that rivaled Fiona's, and often worked alongside Gideon in the stables. Lily was fierce and intelligent, demanding to be taught everything her brother learned, refusing to be left behind just because she was a girl. Samuel was the gentle one, quiet and observant, with a gift for making everyone around him feel special. Mrs. Chen grew older but no less essential to the household. She'd become grandmother to the children in every way that mattered, teaching them to cook traditional Chinese dishes, telling them stories of her childhood, loving them with a steady devotion that enriched all their lives. The ranch continued to thrive. Gideon expanded into cattle breeding as well, diversifying their operations. They were one of the most respected ranching families in the region, known for fair dealing and quality stock. But through all the success and growth, Gideon never forgot what mattered most. Every morning he still found reasons to tell Fiona he loved her. Every evening they still sat together on the porch, talking about their days. He still treated her like she was precious, essential, irreplaceable. And Fiona, who'd spent the first 21 years of her life believing she was nobody, had become someone who mattered deeply to many people. She was a wife, a mother, a rancher, a friend. She was respected in town, relied upon by her family, loved beyond measure. One day in the summer of 1895, as Fiona was working in the garden with Lily, now 11 and already as tall as her mother, Gabriel came running from the direction of town. "Ma, Pa says come quick. There's news." Fiona's heart jumped, always fearing bad news. But Gabriel was smiling, so perhaps it wasn't terrible. She and Lily hurried to the house where Gideon was waiting with a telegram. "What is it?" "Remember that horse breeder from Kentucky who came through last year? The one who was so impressed with Ranger's line?" "Yes. He wants to buy not just horses, but expertise. He's offering me a consulting position helping establish breeding programs throughout the region. It would mean travel, maybe 2 or 3 trips a year, but the money is substantial. And the reputation it would bring to our ranch. He was excited. She could see it in his eyes. But he was also watching her carefully, waiting for her reaction. "What do you think?" he asked. "Should we do it?" Fiona considered. Travel would mean time apart. But it would also mean opportunity, growth, a chance for Gideon to share his knowledge more widely. "I think," she said slowly, "that you should do it, but with one condition." "What's that?" "Sometimes I come with you. I want to see new places. I want to meet new people. And I don't want to spend too much time away from my husband." Gideon's smile was brilliant. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around like he had when they were courting. "Deal. Absolutely deal." The children cheered. Mrs. Chen, listening from the kitchen, called out her approval. And Fiona laughed, held in the arms of the man who taught her that being important didn't mean being perfect or accomplished or extraordinary. It meant being loved. It meant mattering to someone. It meant existence itself was enough. Over the next several years, Gideon did indeed consult for breeders throughout the region. Sometimes Fiona traveled with him, leaving the children in Mrs. Chen's capable care. They visited ranches in Missouri and Texas, met fascinating people, saw new places. Fiona, who'd once believed she'd never leave Leavenworth, found she loved traveling with her husband, loved the adventure of it. But she always loved coming home more. Loved the way their children rushed out to greet them. Loved the way Mrs. Chen would have their favorite meals prepared. Loved the way the ranch felt like the center of the universe, the place where everything important happened. Gabriel, at 17, was talking about going to university to study animal husbandry more formally. Gideon was proud beyond words, though he'd miss having his son's help on the ranch. Lily, at 14, declared she wanted to be a veterinarian, despite everyone telling her that wasn't a profession for women. Samuel, at 9, loved the ranch but showed signs of being more interested in books and learning than horses and cattle. "They're all so different," Fiona said one night. "So sure of themselves." "They know they're loved," Gideon said simply. "They know their worth. That gives them the confidence to pursue what calls to them. Because of how you raised them. Because of how we raised them." He pulled her close. "Fiona, you're an incredible mother. They learned their confidence from watching you become confident. They learned their strength from your strength. I learned it from you. Then maybe we learned it from each other." He kissed her softly. "Maybe that's what love does. It teaches us to be better than we thought we could be." In 1900, as the new century dawned, the ranch celebrated its 25th year under Gideon's ownership. They threw a huge party, inviting everyone who'd been part of their journey. Old ranch hands and their families, neighbors and friends, business associates who'd become personal friends. Fiona stood on the porch as the party swirled around them, watching Gideon talk with a group of men about horses. Gabriel stood beside his father, now a man himself at 21, adding his own observations. Lily was arguing animatedly with someone about whether women should be allowed in veterinary programs. Samuel was sitting with Mrs. Chen, reading to her because her eyes were getting weaker. "Happy." Gideon appeared at her elbow, as if summoned by her thoughts. "So happy I could burst." "Good." He put his arm around her waist. "I want to say something while everyone's here." Before she could ask what, he was calling for attention. The party quieted, everyone turning to look at them. "I just want to say thank you," Gideon began. "To all of you who have been part of our lives over these years. This ranch, this life, none of it would mean anything without the people who have shared it with us." He turned to look at Fiona. "But especially, I want to acknowledge my wife. 22 years ago, she arrived in Leavenworth with nothing but courage and hope. She took a chance on this ranch and on me. And every day since, she's made everything better just by being herself. She's an amazing mother, an incredible partner, and the best person I know. Fiona, you are the heart of this family. You are essential to everything we've built. And I want everyone here to know that. Fiona's eyes filled with tears. After all these years, he could still surprise her, still make her feel like the most important person in the world. So here's to Fiona, Gideon raised his glass. To the woman who believed she'd never feel important, and to whom important now means simply existing as herself. Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the toast. Fiona wiped her eyes, overwhelmed by the love and acceptance in the faces around her. Later, after the guests had gone home and the children had gone to bed, Fiona and Gideon sat on their porch in the darkness, watching the stars. "That was quite a speech," Fiona said. "Every word was true. I know. That's what makes it so overwhelming." She took his hand. 22 years. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I climbed into that corral with Copper. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. It was a lifetime ago. We're different people now. But still in love. More in love, Gideon corrected. Deeper love. Truer love. The kind that's been tested and proven and built on day after day of choosing each other. "I choose you," Fiona said softly. "Every day I choose you. And I choose you. Every day, every moment for the rest of my life." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, hearts aligned. The ranch spread out around them in the darkness, the barn where Copper still lived in comfortable retirement, the stables full of her descendants, the house full of sleeping children and decades of memories. "You ever think about that first day?" Fiona asked. "What made you hire me? Honestly." "It was the way you looked at Copper. Like she mattered. Like gentling her was important not because of what she was worth, but because of what she needed. I'd been so focused on the business of it all that I'd forgotten the heart of it. You reminded me. I thought you hired me because you felt sorry for me. I hired you because I recognized something in you, a strength you didn't even know you had, a worthiness you couldn't see. I hired you because something in me knew that you were going to change everything." "Did I? You changed everything." He brought her hand to his lips. "You taught me that success isn't just about building something impressive. It's about building something meaningful. A life, not just a business. A family, not just a legacy. You taught me that I could be loved, that I deserved to be loved. That simply existing was enough. It's more than enough. Your existence is everything." They stayed on the porch until the stars began to fade with approaching dawn. Inside, their children slept peacefully. In the barn, horses dozed in their stalls. In the kitchen, Mrs. Chen would soon begin preparing breakfast. Life would continue its steady rhythm, full of work and love and purpose. But in that moment, on that porch, Fiona felt the full weight of her transformation. From a woman who believed she was nobody to a woman who knew, bone deep, that she was everything to the people who mattered most. "Thank you," she whispered to Gideon. "For what?" "For making important mean my existence. For teaching me that being myself was enough. For loving me until I could love myself. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for building this life with me." As the sun began to rise over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Fiona leaned her head on her husband's shoulder and felt, perhaps for the first time in her life, completely at peace with exactly who she was and where she belonged. The years that followed were gentle ones. Gabriel did go to university, studying animal husbandry, and returning to the ranch with new knowledge and ideas that helped them continue to improve their breeding program. He eventually married a schoolteacher from Leavenworth, a smart and kind woman who fit seamlessly into the family. Their first child, a daughter they named Lillian after Gideon's mother, was born in 1903. Lily fought her way into veterinary school despite the obstacles, becoming one of the first female veterinarians in Kansas. She remained fierce and determined, channeling her intensity into helping animals and breaking barriers. She married late, at 30, to a fellow veterinarian who appreciated her passion and drive. They had twin boys who were as energetic as their mother. Samuel pursued education, becoming a teacher himself. He married young, at 23, to a quiet woman who shared his love of books and learning. They had 3 children and lived in town, but visited the ranch often, bringing laughter and life. Mrs. Chen passed peacefully in her sleep in 1908, at the age of 82. The family mourned her deeply, feeling the loss of the woman who'd been grandmother, friend, and anchor. They buried her in the family plot on the ranch, beside Gideon's parents, because that's where she belonged. Copper lived to the remarkable age of 31, producing 15 foals over her lifetime and establishing a bloodline that was sought after throughout the West. When she finally passed in 1909, Fiona wept as though she'd lost a dear friend. In many ways, Copper had been the reason Gideon hired her, the reason her life had changed. "She brought us together," Gideon said as they stood beside Copper's grave. "We owe her everything." "We owe her our happiness," Fiona agreed. Everything good came from that first day. By 1912, Gideon and Fiona were grandparents many times over. The ranch house rang with the sounds of visiting grandchildren. Fiona, at 55, had gray threading through her brown hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Gideon, at 61, moved a bit slower but was still active in running the ranch, though Gabriel had taken over much of the day-to-day operations. They spent their days working together, as they always had. Fiona still helped with the horses, still had that special touch that calmed nervous animals. Gideon still consulted for breeders throughout the region, though he traveled less now, preferring to stay close to home and family. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their favorite ritual, unchanged in 34 years of marriage, Fiona reflected on how far she'd come. "You know what I was thinking about today?" she asked. "What's that?" "That girl who got off the train in Leavenworth with $23 and no hope. I can barely remember being her. She's still in you, just grown, transformed." "No, I don't think so. That girl didn't believe in herself, didn't believe she mattered. This woman knows better. This woman learned what was always true, that she always mattered. I just helped you see it." Fiona turned to look at her husband. He was older now, his dark hair silver, his face lined with years of sun and wind. But his eyes were the same gray that had looked at her with such intensity that first day, that had seen value in her when she couldn't see it in herself. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "I don't mean that dramatically. I mean it literally. Without you, without this place, without being shown that I could matter to someone, I don't know what would have become of me. You would have survived. You're stronger than you know. Maybe, but I wouldn't have thrived. I wouldn't have bloomed. That's what you gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be." Gideon reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture as familiar as breathing. "You gave me that too. Before you, I was just going through the motions. Building something because it's what I was supposed to do. You taught me why it mattered. You gave me purpose beyond just success. We saved each other then. We did. We built this life together, this beautiful, full, meaningful life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower. Inside, they could hear Gabriel and his wife getting ready to leave, children being gathered and goodbyes being said. The sounds of family, of life continuing its generational march. "You have any regrets?" Fiona asked. Gideon considered. "None, not a single one." Every choice led me here to you, to this life. How could I regret any of it? I used to have regrets. Wasted years feeling sorry for myself, feeling like a burden. But not anymore. Because all of that led me to the train station in Leavenworth. Led me to walk out to this ranch. Led me to you. No regrets for either of us then, just gratitude. So much gratitude. Fiona squeezed his hand. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for loving me into being. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing me every day. Thank you for making my life infinitely richer just by being in it. Gabriel appeared in the doorway. Ma, Pa, we're heading out. Thank you for dinner. They stood, embracing their son and his family, kissing grandchildren, waving as the wagon pulled away. Then they returned to their spot on the porch, to their ritual, to their life. Think we'll see 80? Fiona asked, only half joking. I intend to make it to at least 90, just to give us as much time together as possible. 90 sounds good. More grandchildren to spoil. More sunsets to watch. More days of this. More days of you, Gideon corrected. That's what I want. As many days with you as the universe will grant me. Fiona leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. This man had given her everything: love, purpose, family, home. But most importantly, he'd given her belief in her own worth. I love you, she said, more than I can ever express. I know, I feel the same way. Some things are too big for words, but we try anyway. But we try anyway, he agreed. As darkness fell over the ranch, over Kansas, over their corner of the world, Fiona felt complete peace. She'd spent the first 21 years of her life feeling invisible and insignificant. She'd spent the last 34 years being cherished and valued. And she knew with absolute certainty that she mattered. Not because of anything she'd accomplished or achieved, but simply because she existed. Because to Gideon, to their children, to their grandchildren, her existence itself was precious. The rancher had made important mean her existence. And in doing so, he'd given her the greatest gift imaginable, the ability to finally, truly, love herself. Years continued to pass in the gentle rhythm of ranch life. Gideon and Fiona celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1918, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Gabriel ran the ranch with his father's wisdom and his mother's compassion. Lily had become renowned as one of the finest veterinarians in the region. Samuel's school was thriving, teaching a new generation of Kansas children. Gideon passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1921, at the age of 70. Fiona held his hand through his last night, talking about their life together, reminding him of all the moments that had mattered. When he took his final breath, she felt as though part of her soul left with him, but she didn't break. She grieved deeply, missing him with an ache that never fully went away. But she also carried forward, living the life they'd built together, maintaining the legacy they'd created. She stayed on the ranch, helped Gabriel continue the work, loved her growing family. When people asked how she managed the loss, she always said the same thing. He gave me the strength to believe in myself. That strength didn't die with him. It's part of me now, forever. Fiona Wright Ramsey lived to be 83 years old, passing peacefully in 1936, surrounded by 3 generations of family who loved her deeply. She'd outlived her beloved husband by 15 years, but those years were full of purpose and love and meaning. They buried her beside Gideon, in the family plot on the ranch they'd built together. The headstone was simple but perfect. Fiona Wright Ramsey, 1853-1936, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She mattered. Gabriel, standing at his mother's grave with tears streaming down his face, thought about the stories she'd told over the years, about arriving in Leavenworth with nothing, about finding purpose and love at this ranch, about learning slowly and surely that her existence had value. She did matter, he said to his own children and grandchildren gathered around. She mattered more than she ever knew. She was the heart of this family, the reason all of us exist. And everything she taught us about love and worth and treating people with dignity that lives on in all of us. And it did. For generations after, the Ramsey family carried forward the lessons Gideon and Fiona had modeled. They ran the ranch with integrity and compassion. They treated everyone with respect. They made sure every child born into the family knew, without question, that they were loved and valued simply for existing. The story of Fiona and Gideon became family legend, the tale of two people who found each other when they needed it most, who built a life of purpose and meaning, who proved that love could transform everything. It was told at family gatherings, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the most important things in life are the simplest: being seen, being valued, being loved. The ranch itself continued operating well into the 21st century, still in the family, still breeding fine horses, still standing as testament to what two people had built when they chose to believe in each other and in themselves. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Gideon and Fiona were together again, hands linked, watching over the legacy of love they'd created. A rancher and a woman who'd believed she was nobody, who'd found in each other the everything they'd both been seeking. Their love story was simple in its way: no grand adventures, no dramatic rescues, no epic obstacles overcome. Just two people choosing each other, day after day, year after year. Just a man who saw value where a woman couldn't see it in herself. Just a woman who let herself be loved until she could love herself. Just a rancher who made important mean her existence. And in the end, that was everything.